Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today on the Cancer Project podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you about all the great things that are happening with Leo, but also I want people to get to know you and your background as well, because I think it's a really interesting story. So thank you for joining us.
No, really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your training and how you ended up in the world of proton therapy.
Yeah, so I'm a physicist by background. Got into physics really just for a love of figuring out how things work. You know, one of those annoying kids at school that's always just, oh, why is it like that? Yeah, why is that? So I've always loved physics. And while I was studying physics at university, unfortunately, my dad died of cancer.
Okay.
So I saw him go through what was a very difficult journey. And it was just an opportunity really getting into radiotherapy to use that love of physics. It's a very physics heavy industry.
Right.
And a passion of making a difference to cancer patients' lives. So getting into developing technology originally, and then now running Leo Cancer Care. So
for those of listeners that are not familiar with how you end up as a medical physicist, what's the training like to become a medical physicist?
Yeah, so you go first into university and study physics, the baseline physics, which is where I learn about particle accelerators, and quantum physics is a particular passion. Yeah. And then I trained in the UK rather than in the US, so then go and study specifically medical physics following that.
Okay. And so to learn about medical physics, what are you learning about?
Yes, there's a lot of different elements there, but it's broad range of applications of physics within the clinical setting. So radiotherapy, radiology, you know, all of those areas of healthcare are heavy on the physics side.
Yeah. What was your first job out of training?
So I went straight into Elekta. Okay. So for me, it was there was an opportunity to go into working in the clinic. And that would have been great. I'm sure I would have really enjoyed that. But I think for industry, working in industry, it gives you that broader impact possibility. You know, I can go and develop technology that is impacting millions of people. Right. That always had a much stronger pull for me.
And so when you were with Elekta, what were you doing with Elekta? And I guess, again, maybe for those not as familiar with some of these names that we're throwing around, so Elekta makes linear accelerators, and they also make treatment planning software, software that's used to develop radiation treatment plans. They make a medical record system, Mosaic, that does the verification of the radiation dose that's being delivered each day. So what, in that kind of broad spectrum of different parts of Elekta, what were you doing?
Yeah, so I was really working within their physics team, developing the hardware platforms. Okay. So I've always been terrible with software, hate coding, which is a bit unusual for a physicist. Yeah. So I was always on the hardware technology platform design. So things like designing calibration procedures specifically for their multi-leaf collimators, the bits that shape the radiation beam, all the way through to when I left Elekta being a product owner, responsible for pretty much all of the physics activities that were on the MR-guided LINAC. Okay. So that was taking an MRI machine, putting it with a radiotherapy treatment platform to create this combined imaging and treatment modality, which was super exciting.
Because the goal with radiation has always been, how do you get as much radiation to the tumor as possible and as little radiation to healthy tissue as possible? And so part of that's immobilizing the patient. Part of that is designing different ways to deliver the beam of radiation. Part of it is, what radiation are you using? Are you using high energy photons or high energy protons? But part of it is the imaging. What can you see as you're developing the treatment plan, and then what can you see inside the treatment room? So that was an interesting project, merging MRI, which does give a good view of what's happening inside the body, with the actual delivery of radiation.
But they're two things that really don't go together, MRI and radiotherapy.
Yeah.
It's like almost putting oil and water together because the MRI will interfere with radiotherapy delivery and the radiotherapy delivery will interfere with the MRI imaging. Yeah. So it really is something those two things shouldn't sit in the same room, which as a physicist, then that's really exciting.
Those are the fun projects to work on. Yeah. So then you ended up leaving Elekta for different opportunities. So tell us about that transition.
Yeah, so I came out of Elekta and really got to the end of that project. And while I was really excited and proud of the product that we'd developed, I couldn't help but see it was bigger than conventional radiation therapy. It was certainly more expensive, but it was also more complicated than conventional radiotherapy. It required more people in the treatment rooms, and they required more training to be able to use an MR-Linac. And that didn't really fulfill the dream of how do we make radiotherapy available across the globe, which is something that's always been important to me. So then I became aware of a research group down in Sydney in Australia. Never been to Sydney before, but led by Paul Keel, who used to be a Stanford professor, and then he moved back to the University of Sydney. And they were looking at exactly that. How do we make radiotherapy globally accessible? How do we reduce the costs and get it to more people?
Right.
And they came to the realization that the way of doing that is to keep the radiation beam fixed and to move the patient instead.
Okay.
Everybody else previously in radiotherapy development had the patient lay on a table and moved the radiation beam with respect to that patient.
Right.
These guys were really bold in their thinking in saying, well, that movement of the radiation beam accounts for probably 75% of the cost.
Okay.
So if we change that and flip it on its head and we instead move the patient, now the costs and the complexity come down.
Okay.
So they got in touch with me and said, we're looking for people that have got industry experience, that have developed products, not just ideas, to come join this group and start building this out into an idea that could be productized and commercialized.
Okay. And you're in England at this time?
I was in London, yeah.
You're in London,
I was in London at that time.
So then did you move to Sydney?
I did.
Okay,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, I did. Never been down there before.
Yeah.
Even if the job opportunity hadn't have been great, the idea of living in Sydney for a year and a half was pretty fantastic. So yeah, I packed up my bags and moved to Sydney.
Okay. And were you married at this time? Kids?
No. Okay. That was a lot easier to do.
A little bit easier to do when it's,
So not married. I'd, my wife, Sophie, I'd known her for about 6 months at the time.
Okay.
So I remember taking her for dinner and saying, hey, Soph, I know we've only known each other for 6 months, but I'm thinking about moving to Sydney. And she went, oh, I've always wanted to go to Sydney.
Okay.
I'll come with you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, so she went. Okay. So you get there. What was it like, kind of that early stage? I mean, Elekta is a big company. They've got a lot of resources, offices. They've been around for a while. This was a startup this is a quintessential startup.
Yeah, the office was about the same size as the room that we're in today. With the entire team.
Yeah.
And it was a big difference. No processes, no people, no big established office. It was a big difference.
Yeah. What was it like for you jumping into that?
It was exciting, but it was also pretty terrifying.
Okay.
It was going from having people that did everything at Elekta to now having to figure out how to do all of that yourself.
Yeah. So when you guys are talking about doing upright treatments, is that just for photons, or were there conversations about how it might be applied in the proton space?
Yeah, so actually originally it wasn't in the upright orientation. Okay. So that's where we are today, treating patients upright. But the original idea was to have them lay down still and rotate them in the supine orientation.
Oh, wow.
But it was all for photons. So the reason that group started is because they were trying to address the access or the lack of access to conventional radiotherapy in rural Australia. Okay. So you're 30% more likely to die from cancer if you live outside of Sydney and Melbourne. Okay. Which in a country like Australia is pretty shocking.
Yeah. So it's a first world country. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were looking at putting these supine rotating linacs in trucks and taking them out to rural Australia. That's where it started.
Oh, wow.
And then realized it's the difference between academia and an idea and industry where you have real patients that are going to use these machines. The idea of supine rotation, while it was great on paper, didn't actually make sense then in reality. So that was then the transition to upright.
Okay.
Was because the idea of supine didn't work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because, being more on the clinical side, there's a lot of things that sound good, and then you realize that you're dealing with people.
Oh, absolutely.
And people come with a lot of variability and a lot of needs that a part does not.
Yeah.
So that's so then you guys you did start working on an upright concept then.
Oh yeah. So that realization that in order to rotate you have to be upright was made in Australia. And then we started realizing, once we'd got our heads around that people from MD Anderson had looked and researched upright radiotherapy, Northwestern, Chicago.
Yep.
And they'd proven out some pretty interesting clinical differences.
Yep.
So organ motion reduction, things like that happen when you're upright rather than lay down. So the story kind of came together nicely, but it was still focused on photons originally, still looking at how do we build these smaller, smarter, more effective linacs.
So I think with that project, and we've talked about this before, there's the also with academia versus industry, there's also a fundraising component and just how do you get a product to market element. You have to hire people, and you have operating costs and research costs. And so talk a little bit about you're moving out of this medical physics world, very science oriented, and you're starting to pick up on the business element of getting a product to market. I mean, when did that start to become interesting to you, or did you really start to think about that?
Yeah, it was certainly never my plan to become a CEO.
Yeah.
It was certainly never my plan to go into the commercial side of things. I always wanted to stay in industry and design technology. But in Australia, as we'd started to build out this idea, you're exactly right. You need to raise money and you need to find investors that believe in your vision. And in Australia, that was a real challenge. It was a real challenge. Venture capital didn't really invest in healthcare and in medtech.
Right.
Back then, it's improved significantly since then. But it just wasn't there. So the company actually, in its original form, went bankrupt.
Okay.
So it was not a grand design, a grand plan to go and then learn how to raise money.
Yeah.
But it was more out of necessity.
Yep.
So with nobody else being in a position where they wanted to leave Australia at that point, I said, well, I've been spending years designing linear accelerators. How hard can it be to go and raise money for them?
Right.
So how wrong could I have been?
Yeah. And so then did you leave Australia at this time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So at that point, I genuinely Googled top 10 medical device investors and saw San Francisco.
Yeah.
So that was it. If I believed in what we were doing and believed in the company, I knew that I had to pack up my bags again and leave Sydney.
So you go to Sophie. Are you guys dating, married at this time?
Well, I was very, very strategic.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, it's not ideal that I'm going back to her again and asking her to move everything and relocate. So we got engaged before I asked her that time.
Okay, yeah.
So she'd agreed to marry me, so she was already committed there.
Okay, yeah.
And then I went back and said, okay, to make this work, we need to leave Sydney. Yeah, by the way, now you've said yes.
You've said yes, yeah.
We need to leave Sydney and move to San Fran.
Okay. And so what were the early days there in San Francisco like? So somebody's trying to raise money. You've never done this before.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
That's kind of what I was asking myself on a daily basis. What on earth am I doing here? And it's just going and meeting as many people as you possibly can. networking like you've never networked before, getting feedback, asking people why they're saying no, and trying to understand how your pitch needs to change in order to start getting some of those yeses. So it was just meeting hundreds of people over the course of probably the first 3 months while I was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're sending emails, you're going to networking events, you're knocking on doors. Yeah. Literally walking into companies.
Phone calls. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. And so, describe that moment when you finally got the first yes.
Yeah, it was a pretty epic feeling.
Yeah.
You know, when somebody's really decided to invest, they've bought into your vision.
Yeah.
It's not only that they've decided to put the money in that allows you to continue, but it's the feeling of knowing that somebody else buys into your vision. If you're the only one out there pushing something, then you kind of feel like, is this a good idea? Am I crazy? Once somebody looks at it and says, not only does that idea make sense, but you actually have a business that makes sense as well. So it's a great feeling, absolutely fantastic feeling. And then once we got the first one, raising money is really, you know, it's about getting momentum behind it.
Right.
So once you get one person buying into it, then you tend to be able to get multiple.
And so what were you raising money for at that point?
So at that point, we were really raising money to start building out the design, hire people, pay for parts to build early prototypes. And then as well as, you know, some of the more obvious things like rent, bills, the standard sort of stuff.
And were you thinking that you're going to move operations to the US as well? Was that part of the process of going to San Francisco and raising the money, that the kind of core of the team is going to move to the US? Yeah,
absolutely. It was really, you know, let's relocate everything. Let's move to San Francisco. And let's build out the business here. That was absolutely the plan. Didn't quite go to plan. But that was definitely the intention.
Okay. And when did Rock Mackey get involved, or how does he come into the story?
Yeah, so Rock is an industry legend.
Right.
He's such an innovative person. He's changed the industry a couple of times with tomotherapy and the Pinnacle treatment planning system. So he was actually involved in Australia. So he was, when the research group was developed and decided to spin out then as an entity, Rock was originally an advisor and then joined the first board of directors in Australia.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you moved to the US, and then how did you end up in Wisconsin? Was that because of Rock?
Yeah, so when we started getting some traction and the first investors coming in, then it was sort of this actually looks like it's going to happen moment now. And I put more time and effort then at that point into focusing on the business plan and exactly how we're going to build. And we realized, you know, that it was just so expensive to build a business in San Francisco.
Right.
So if we built the business in Madison, which is where Rock lives, but also where companies like Accuray have been built, so there's good supply chain, there's good talent there, the cost of hiring people in Madison was, you know, 40, 50% in some cases lower than San Francisco.
Okay. And so at what point during this process do you start really honing in on this patient positioning system, which we'll get into the details of what the product is or what the products are? When did you really start to hone in on this being a proton therapy product?
Yeah. So again, remember, you know, the big reason initially for rotating the patient rather than the machine was to reduce the size, the cost and complexity. And that's a problem for conventional radiotherapy. But as we engaged with industry experts, they kept saying, well, yes, you know, it is a problem for conventional radiotherapy, but protons is a massive issue. You know, protons, there was no access or very limited access worldwide for a technology that is really the gold standard for treating cancer. And the reason for that lack of access was always size, cost, and complexity. So we realized that, you know, to solve the problem in Linacs could wait. We would go and we'd first address this issue with proton therapy.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about a gantry, like the gantry that we have at our facility, so that's the device that actually can rotate 360 degrees around the patient and deliver protons at any of these different angles into the patient. Our gantry is 36 feet wide and weighs 100 tons.
Yep.
So if you think about, I mean, that's 3 stories, 36 feet. You've got to shield it. So you have this massive concrete bunker that it sits in. Then it weighs 100 tons, and that whole thing has to rotate with millimeter or even micron precision around a patient. It's the most complex medical device that's ever been made, I would say.
Yep.
MR Linacs may be a close second. And so, yeah, it's just cost prohibitive to put those in every market that really could benefit from proton therapy. So you guys start to develop this product. What were some of the really big challenges early on as you're honing in on this is going to be our first commercial product? What were some of the things that maybe even made you say, did we make the right decision here?
Yeah, it was always for us, it was less of a technical challenge.
Yeah.
You know, we're actually simplifying the technology tremendously. So the things for us, the big hurdles to overcome, it was never about developing the technology. We were always confident we could do that. But we are making a bold change. And generally as humans, we don't like change.
Right.
You know, it makes us have to really think about things and make sure that we're confident we're doing the right thing. So we had to go out and we had to convince early customers, you know, because investors look at commercial traction and say, show me people that are interested in buying this. So before having anything, before we've built anything, we had to go out to engage with early customers that have always done things in the supine position.
Right.
Convince them that upright had a place and it could work. And that's really tricky. You have to have a tremendous amount of passion and conviction in what you're doing.
Who were some of the early champions for you that you would give credit to say, okay, well, this is maybe obviously internal. You guys are on board with this idea of moving a patient from laying on their back or laying on their stomach to sitting in a chair. Who were some of the people outside of the company that came alongside and said, no, this really can work?
Yeah. So, I mean, the very, very first research partner that we engaged with that started working with us was a guy called Vincent Gregoire, who's based over in Lyon in France. So he had always wanted to put protons into that center and come across the same problems of gantries are really big, they're expensive, it's very difficult to do that in a European city. So, you know, when I first met him back in 2019, he just got it instantly. Okay. And he's one of these people where if you tell him something can't be done, he's not, he doesn't want to run away from that. He's more likely to want to do it. So you need those kind of brave, committed people on board to help drive change.
So that's in France. What about in the US?
So France, in the US, we got a lot of feedback from people like Mark Pancook. Okay. So Mark Pancook up at the Northwestern Proton Center, he'd been treating patients upright at this point for his thoracic tumors. So he understood the benefits. He understood why we were doing what we're doing. But he was also able to say, these are all the reasons why I've struggled with it. And these are the things, if you're going to start from square one, try and fix this problem, this problem, and this problem. So that was really, really helpful. And then we got support from places like MD Anderson as well that had published data on the benefits of upright. And the first center that started working with us and executed a commercial contract in the US was the University of Wisconsin. Okay. So Paul Harari, who was the chair there, he'd tried for 8 years to get proton therapy into his department. He'd been to the board with multiple different proposals and said, hey, we need protons with the University of Wisconsin. Let's try and find a way of doing this. And it had never worked financially. Always worked clinically, made sense from a clinical point of view, but the finances never made sense. Right.
And so I do want to talk about somebody that you brought onto your team that I know really well, Nick Schroeder. He helped build, and I'll never forget this because I worked at the Proton Center in Oklahoma City. And here's this kind of eccentric South African who had helped build a Proton system in South Africa. And then he was at IU, and that's essentially an in-house system that was built there. So he always had this idea of like, kind of like the doctor you were talking about in Lyon, that if somebody says it's impossible, Nick's going to take it on.
Yep.
And he's going to say, it's not impossible. We're going to figure it out. And so we built that chair in Oklahoma, actually, first, even before Chicago. And we still have it upstairs in our mezzanine. And it was very rudimentary. I mean, it almost felt like it got built in a garage, but it worked. I mean, we could attach it to the Forte robot that was in the room and treat patients with sitting in this chair. And then Chicago kind of took it to the next level with Mark's leadership. So talk a little bit about Nick and kind of what he's brought to Leo.
Yeah, he's just the most practical genius that you've ever come across. I've met lots of really smart people that can come up with ideas. I think the amazing thing about Nick is, you come to him with a problem. You say, Nick, I'm worried about quality assurance, for example, and how we're going to do that. And not only is he going to turn around and say, don't worry about the problem because here's how we approach it. But he's also going to turn around and go, oh, and by the way, I've built that solution in my shed. And I've also found a supplier who can build it commercially as well. So he'll never shy away from any challenge. He's incredibly passionate about two things in life, proton therapy and barbecue.
That's true.
And he just brings so much passion into
it. And he raises
he
his own meat and butchers his own meat. This is not like
he's not a guy
catering in barbecue.
Of.
This is him, start to finish doing his own barbecue. That's funny. Now, Nick is great. And I know you have a lot of great people that work for Leo. Where did the name come from? So Leo, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Leo is the constellation that comes after cancer.
Okay.
So as an organization, that's our mission. We're constantly coming after cancer. We're constantly trying to find ways of developing technology that will treat cancer patients. So that's where it came from in that sense. It's also associated then with lions, which particularly over in places like Asia are associated with, figure of strength. So bringing those two things together, we got Leo Cancer Care.
And one of the things that you guys have done a great thing or a great job with your marketing. And I know that you take all the credit for that. But no, seriously, that's actually, you made a great decision, getting engaged to Sophie and convincing her to move to San Francisco. But then you also made a great decision bringing her on to help with the marketing for Leo. And I loved what you guys have done with some of your campaigns talking about creating a more human way to treat cancer. So talk a little bit about that and what she's brought to the company and just the vision for how you guys have marketed Leo.
Yeah, so we made a very conscious decision that within our marketing team, we wouldn't put anybody in there that was already in the industry.
Okay.
So, you tend to go around the other providers of radiation therapy equipment, and it's the same marketing directors, chief marketing officers that go from company to company. Yeah. And you can kind of tell then that the messaging all looks and feels very much the same. Right. We didn't do that. We looked at it and said, I don't need more industry radiotherapy knowledge to come from my marketing team. What I need is people that are really good marketeers. I need people that can take the powerful message that we've got and can communicate that well. Industry knowledge can come from people like Rock and Nick. And there's nobody better out there than those two to provide that industry knowledge. So Sophie had been leading campaigns at McDonald's and Volkswagen, companies like that, that are much more, targeted with their marketing and frankly better at putting forward their messaging than a lot of healthcare organizations. So we put her in our marketing director position, and she's just done a wonderful job. It helps, I think, in many ways that she doesn't have that industry expertise. Right. She's much more likely to come and say, well, why have we done it like that?
Yeah.
And actually, if you get challenged like that and questioned, it's often you sit there and go, well, Yeah, if I can't give you a solid reason of why it's like that, let's look at it and question whether it needs to be that way.
Right.
But yeah, the whole idea of being a more human way to deliver radiation therapy, that was her baby. That was her idea. And it came from this idea of, human beings, when we put them in the radiotherapy environment, whether it's protons or photons, that is, without a shadow of a doubt, the scariest moment in their life.
Right.
They've never been through, most people, anything more scary than being treated for cancer.
Right.
So then we started thinking about other times that people are scared, and if you think about giving a big presentation, a job interview, meeting in-laws for the first time, you name it, anything that makes you anxious, you wouldn't choose to do it lying down.
Right.
You'd always choose to be upright, and engaged and empowered and part of that process. So what we realized is that by putting patients back at the center of their care and putting them upright, we were doing exactly that. We were empowering them and making them feel more human and giving them that humanity back at the time where they were really being referred to as just patients.
Yeah, that's great. So now let's transition to the product itself, or products, I guess, because there's a lot of exciting things happening from a development standpoint. So you guys have had a couple of big announcements recently. Talk a little bit about what's happened over the last 12 months with Leo.
Yeah, so we really started from a point of view of everyone saying it was crazy. Yeah, everyone said it was a terrible idea and it was never going to work in 2018. Yeah. I remember going to Estro in Barcelona and nobody wanted to meet. There was no opportunity to sit and meet with customers or vendors. Everyone just thought it was a crazy idea.
I would like to go on record and say that I did not think it was a crazy idea early on. So...
yeah, that's true. Actually, you've always been incredibly supportive. But yeah, it was really difficult back in those early days to get traction and get it moving. So to see it now go from 2018 crazy idea, 2025, we're now in a position where there's 39 commercial contracts signed with end users across not just protons, but protons, carbon ion, flash, electron radiotherapy, and now for conventional photon radiotherapy as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And talk about your partnership with Mevion, because there was just a big announcement about FDA approval for the Mevion Fit system.
Yeah, so as a hardware company to get an FDA, I know a lot of people were waiting for that to come through. It was a big relief. Yeah. But that is huge. That takes it from an idea and something built in the factory to now something that is ready for treating patients. Yeah. So that was a huge announcement for us and a huge announcement for our partners at Mevion as well. So the way that partnership works, proton therapy relies on having a few different things. You've got the bit that produces the radiation, the proton source. Then you've got to deliver that proton source to the patient. So that's where we have our rotating patient positioning system and our integrated CT imaging. Right. So the partnership with Mevion is really that they provide the accelerator, and they've been doing that for many years. It's the smallest accelerator anywhere in the world for proton therapy. And then we provide the patient positioning and the imaging. And the combination of all of those components gives us what we call this FIT product.
And the FIT, that name comes from the fact that whole setup can fit inside of a linear accelerator vault.
Exactly that, yeah.
And that's really been the holy grail. I mean, we used to talk about that at Procure back when I was working there in 2010 and 2011, and we were trying to figure out how to commercialize proton therapy and make it more accessible to more patients. And it half jokingly, honestly, at the time, well, if you could ever figure out how to put it in a LINAC vault, that would be the way that you could create more access, because there's 4,000 plus linear accelerator vaults in the United States. And you always have to go and build a big new gantry vault. That's just going to eliminate a lot of customers that either don't have the space or don't have the funds to undertake this big new construction project.
Exactly. Yeah. And people said it was impossible. People said it was completely impossible. Never happened to put protons inside of a LINAC vault. Yes. And Mevion's been a phenomenal partner in sharing in that vision of let's make protons accessible to all, not just big academic medical centers. Yeah. So now we're in a position where, with 200 people went to Stanford during this show.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, to go and see that it's real. Yeah. This impossible task has been achieved with Leo Cancer Care and with Mevion.
And they're supposed to go live when?
This year.
Okay.
Yeah. So systems FDA cleared, fully installed. They've got some state licensing to get pinned down, but they should be treating this year.
That'll be a big day. That's a long journey from workshop in Sydney to Stanford treating the first patient on this system.
It sure is, yeah.
So what are you personally most proud of?
Yeah, I think most proud of the team that we've built and what they've been able to achieve. We've got a lot of people. Our VP of engineering, for example, he never went to university and never got a degree in engineering. He went into industry as an apprentice. And one of the smartest people I know, really, really smart guy, but got pigeonholed into a position where it is, you can't be responsible for developing anything because you've not been to university.
Right.
Getting the fact that he'd spent years and years and years actually being hands-on and developing this, he was always pigeonholed into a role without responsibility. And at Leo, we brought him in and we said, not show us the paperwork that you've got that proves you can do this, but actually go and deliver.
Right.
And to see him now leading our engineering team with tremendous engineers in that team, but we've created an organization that allows people to come and, really fulfill their full potential.
Yeah.
So seeing people grow like that and develop in their profession, that's something that I'm incredibly proud of.
Yeah, that's neat. So you've created an amazing product, but then you also have this team of people that you're impacting. And I think as a leader, you always want to see that and be a part of that. How have you taken the experience that you had with your dad going through cancer treatment to what you're doing today? I mean, that's obviously something that was very, very personal, and that must impact the way that you approach what you're doing with your company today.
It definitely does. Yeah. My dad was a superhero to me. He was the best human being still to this day I've ever met. Yeah. So being in a position where we're developing technology that can make a difference to lives like his, we couldn't do it for him. But to be in a position where we're making a difference to other patients like him is the driver. Yeah. And I think when you're building a company, it's hard. It's really, really hard. You get days where you don't think it's gonna work. You get days where people say they don't believe in it. Yeah. You get days where people don't want to fund it. And I think if you're motivated just financially, just doesn't work. You'll bail. You'll walk away from the difficulties that you have 9 times out of 10 with startup companies. So for me, it's always been about something just so much more important than money. We're not building a business here just to build a business and to be financially successful. We're building a business because throughout our organization, you see people that have been directly impacted by cancer. Yeah. People that have lost loved ones to cancer. So for us to be able to go and take something like proton therapy that truly has the ability to save lives and take it to places that it's never been before, that's a reason for getting out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Stephen. I really appreciate it. Congrats on all of your success personally and with the company. You guys are doing amazing things. And as someone who's been in the proton field for 15 years now, I'm very excited to see this amazing technology create more access for patients to get proton therapy. And I know that you guys are also doing some great things on the Linac side, and you're going to open up, really it was kind of the original vision, is open up rural or third world markets to the power of radiation in treating cancer as well. And so I'm excited to see what's ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, David.